Have you achieved success and a high income, but still lack personal fulfillment and work-life balance? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Successful But Struggling podcast. Join us as Erin, Eunicia, Joanne, and Mim share transformative insights and practical strategies just for you. Discover real stories and lessons that will elevate your personal satisfaction, professional accomplishment, and financial empowerment.
Hi, this is Dr. Erin Hurley, and I am here with my good friend and fellow physician coach, Dr. Joanne Sotelo. She is a psychiatrist and a coach. And today she's going to be talking about why we struggle with stress and overwhelm. And stay tuned because she's also going to share with us 3 tools that you can start implementing right away to start dealing with that. Joanne, it's so good to see you today.
Yes, Erin, thank you so much. I love it when we get together. And this is such an important topic, and I recognize that it's a big topic. So no, we're not going to talk about all the things that we can talk about, but when we think of, right, like us, that we are successful, but yet we struggle. And when I work with my clients, whether it's even as a psychiatrist or when I'm coaching, and because I think because I'm a psychiatrist and I have that filter that I can talk so much about anxiety and all the things, I hear, and I'm guilty of this too, of, oh, I don't deal with that. I'm okay. I'm fine. I don't have anxiety. And then I like to go over what are some of our risk factors? What are some of the things that we deal with that we might not be recognizing or labeling as bad stress or overwhelm, but we are struggling with them anyways. And those are the things that get in our way, right? Like when we question why I am doing everything well, I'm checking off all these boxes, why am I not feeling well? Why am I struggling? So that's what I would love to review, a few of those things before we kind of go to some of our strategies that could be helpful right now.
And I think sometimes, I know for myself, I never associated my symptoms that I had during my years of leadership in medicine as burnout. I never thought of myself as a burned out physician, but overwhelm and exhaustion were common. And I think, oh, I wonder if those were my 2 words for burnout, but the word burnout didn't resonate with me until I started studying it more. So it'll be interesting to see maybe what words that Joanne uses that might be like, oh, that is me. Or maybe having a bigger definition of what you think of. Again, I don't think of myself as an anxious person, but maybe we'll be talking about this later, about that perfectionistic and that worry. And maybe those are my words, and somebody else might use the word anxiety. So I'm going to encourage you to listen with open ears and maybe find some hints of things that might resonate with you, even if you don't use those words to define how you're feeling.
Yes, and that's one of the things that I say when I'm coaching, of pay attention to what your gut tells you when you hear these things. Or there's sometimes times when we say like, oh, yes, that's me. Or actually your brain goes, oh, no, not at all. Pay attention to that as well, right? Because we never know. So I'm going to mention just a few, just to open your brain, just to get you primed to what we're going to be talking about later. So the first one that we deal with, and women do struggle a little bit more than men with this, but it's the I need to do it all. And then we sometimes call it that double shift, right? And the role constraints, right? Like we'll have a full day of work, and then we come home, and then we have a lot of responsibilities. Of course, that's going to be stressful. And just because we can do it, and even when we're doing it well, doesn't mean that it's not draining us emotionally more than it needs to. So that's another way that I define stress and overwhelm. We might not be recognizing it as feeling out of sorts, but if we think of our emotions sort of like a gas tank in a car, these are things that are draining us, right? And again, it sometimes sounds like, in our society that it's roles of men and women, but we know now that it's not as defined, right? Like it's not just women who take care of the kids, or, men doing women doing the dishes, right? Like it's a little bit more blurred. But a lot of us, successful but struggling, do have that second shift. And then on top of that, we have this belief, internal or external expectations, that we're supposed to do it all, right?
They're supposed to do it all, yes. And or that it has to be my way. And I bet we'll get more to that later about some of those characteristics that some of us professionals feel that get in the way of allowing others to do it, even if it's different than how we might do it ourselves.
And you alluded to the second one I'm going to talk about, which is the perfectionist.
Yes.
We never deal with that, right, Erin?
I'm going to raise my hand full-fledged. Yes, I have some perfectionistic tendencies. Just ask my family. They'll tell you.
And right, like it's good for us to aim high and want to do things as well as we can. But when it interferes with task completion, when it drains us emotionally again, when it keeps us away from other things that we want to do, right? If it keeps you at work more hours and that keeps you away from the family, that's not a good thing. And it might feel well in one sense, right? Like that's maybe why your brain is not recognizing it. But again, it might be there's a cost and there's a drain later on. So again, these are things that put us at risk, right? So pay attention to those internal and external expectations that we have, right? We talked about that a lot, Erin.
Well, and I think that this resonates with one of the courses that I teach about, give as a healthcare provider, give your patients A+ care, but you don't have to make your documentation an A+ paper, right? You need to do it well enough so it makes sense. But letting go or knowing, I think sometimes we need to recognize, when do we need to be a perfectionist, right? If you're doing surgery on someone, you need to be really perfectionistic. But when you're loading the dishwasher or putting the clothes away, maybe everything doesn't need to be that. And I think sometimes it's hard for some of us professionals to let go of that.
Yeah. And we definitely need to come back to this topic because it's so big, and talking about coaching and, you and I, we both coach women in medicine and men in medicine as well. And a word that I try to promote is precision and not perfection, because it's really hard for those of us who our brain has been programmed into perfection, and it's needed, right? Like I say, don't tell a doctor, oh, you have to cut here near the finger or near the elbow. Just pick somewhere in the middle, right? Or,
it's not gonna work.
Oh, I cannot remember. Was the dose 10 or 100? Was it 10 or 2? Let's pick 50. No, we can't, right? You don't want your doctor to not have that, but you can have precision. The problem is that we never learn how to turn it off later. And again, this is not particular to physicians, right? Like I hear it when I'm talking to other in general, professionals, right? That's part of what got us successful, but it can also get in the way and get us feeling more that drain in the struggle. So we'll definitely come back to this one because I hear it. I know you hear it too. It's something that, we all struggle with in some way or another.
But I like that substitution. And in coaching, we do learn to substitute one thought for another, one phrase for another. And I love that substitution of substituting precision for perfection, because precision for those, A types that resonate with perfectionism, that's a word that resonates with me. I don't have any friction or pushback for precision. And it feels a lot more comfortable to have that land than perfection. Great. I love that.
There's a little bit more room, but it still doesn't make you feel like it's a change of your identity.
Right.
So the other big one that, again, we can talk so much about, so I'll just mention, is imposter syndrome, which is actually an old term, but it's gotten popular in the last couple of years. And again, women do struggle with it more, but it's not unique to women, right? And we're doing things that we know we can do, and yet we question. And it's not the popular sense of imposter syndrome, right? I like to think of what's behind it. Is there a confidence problem? Is there self-doubt? Is there shame? Why are you questioning yourself, right? And kind of digging in a little bit deeper. But that definitely, it's right, like so much of an emotional drain, just questioning ourselves.
And I'm surprised. I didn't realize how prevalent it was in physicians who, as we talk about successful but struggling, most people on the outside look like they got it all together. They're doing patient care. And yet on the inside, they might be questioning, do I deserve this role? I've just been promoted to a leader. And how did I deserve this? And it was amazing to me how prevalent imposter syndrome is, and that it wasn't a me thing, it was an us thing.
Oh, yeah. And I'll go quickly over kind of the other things. So another one, and again, we can talk about it in terms of gender, but don't hear it just like that. But there are biases that we deal with, and discrimination, and right, like it's and there's sometimes subtle things, and sometimes just administrative, institutional issues that get in the way. And it's right. It's again, if we use that analogy that I like of the gas tank in the car, it's almost like you're hitting the pedal and then braking, hitting the pedal and then braking. Like it doesn't necessarily create a big hit in the moment, but it's slowly draining you more. And then also sometimes we just don't have the support. And part of it is because it's not there, or sometimes it's because we don't know how to reach for it, or sometimes we just don't ask for help. And then we know that when we feel like we don't have help, a different part of our brain takes over, right? That's the little bit more of the fear, feeling stuck, and that's not good, right? So again, not to dive super deep in all these areas because they are also important, but I just want you to be aware, because these are the things that accumulate, right? And that sometimes we just look at them in a narrow vision and we're like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. And then we end up minimizing ourselves, and then we beat ourselves up because we're not feeling well, right? So it's I like also the self-compassion that can come from understanding our risk factors and all these things that we deal with a lot of times on a regular basis, unfortunately.
And I think that you alluded to the compounding effect. Maybe we have a little bit of imposter syndrome. Maybe we have a little bit of anxiety or worry. Maybe we have a little bit of overwhelm. You put those together and think of the emotional drain that it's putting on you every day, and you might be discounting that. And so I love that you're raising awareness. Hey, be on the lookout for these things and don't minimize them. Give them credit for how they're making you feel. And it's kind of like greasing an engine, right? If you can take some friction out of an engine, or take your foot off the gas or off the brake and just put it on the gas, think about how much faster you go and how much more smoothly and how less bumpy of the ride it will be when you get that friction taken away.
Yeah, I love our analogies.
Talking about cars.
Yeah, that's good. But yeah, so let me tell you, so that we get to the meat of this, this kind of like as a 3-step framework that you can use at any point. If you're feeling that high level of stress, overwhelm, or even if you're feeling a little bit anxious. And my first step, it's almost the same in every framework, but it's so important, is that we acknowledge and identify what are these things, right? Like and I just gave you a list of things, but you can have your own list of things that you're struggling with, right? And then reflect on those things, right? Like it's what are the thoughts that you're having on a regular basis? What is that self-talk? My goodness, if I love to think of it with that sense of curiosity as someone outside. And the things that we tell ourselves can be so harsh. Like we would never talk to someone else like that. And these are the things that we need to be aware of, because those will definitely add to our struggles and our sense of stress. The other thing also that I mentioned, right, it's what are the expectations? Internal and external, right? So it's not just a list of things that we need to do, but again, coming back to that perfectionism and the self-doubt. And then going a little bit deeper, right? Like what are those relationships? Are the people around you, are they adding to you, or are they kind of draining some of that energy, right? So it's a long list of things that we can think of, right? So think about it again, right? So to give you I love to do this work based on journaling prompts, because if we give our brain questions, it'll answer, right? So it's a great way to get our brain engaged, right? So what are some of those beliefs or behaviors or patterns that you can recognize that are holding you back from what you really want? What are those relationships, right? Like which ones are adding, which ones are, taking away, and those boundaries like we've already talked about. and the expectations, right? So if you just think of those three things, that's like really, really good insight and awareness. And that's where we always need to start. And with honesty and vulnerability and no self-judgment, right? Like I always say, have a filter of love and compassion. Don't use this work against you, always with love and compassion. I always like to say that on the side.
Yeah. Well, and let me ask you this, Joanne, because so many people feel like they don't have time for some of the things that we might recommend. And so, what might be a minimum amount of time that somebody could spend each day or each week on doing these journaling prompts in order to get a decent return on their investment?
Yes, I love that question. I get that question a lot because I love to journal, so it's a recommendation I give all the time. And I have my short version and my long version, right? Like today, as we're recording this, is a Saturday. So this morning, I took my kid to a practice and then came back, made myself some coffee and journal for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. I rarely have the luxury of that time. But if you sit down, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes, and you don't have to do the whole exercise all at once, just give yourself permission to go a little bit deeper and just take one of these questions and journal for 5 minutes. And then go at it again later, another question, and do 5 more minutes. Right. And it adds up to your benefit, definitely. So yeah, I would love to say, let's go on like on a retreat and just journal for a long time. That would be amazing. But it does not need to be that way, right? Like don't discount the benefit just because your brain is telling you, oh, you don't have time for that. But we can all find 5-10 minutes here and there, right? Like we talk about the things that help us and just take a couple of minutes at a time.
Yeah. And you mentioned that cumulative benefit. I know for me, like what meditation is something 12 minutes a day, you add that over 5 years, doing that a few times a week, that's a lot of time. So even if it's just, like you said, 5 minutes a day, what if it's 3 lines a day is better than 0. So I think when we lower the bar so that we can meet that expectation, it makes it easier. So you're more likely to keep up with that new thing that you're doing, the new habit, and not give up because you think, oh, I just can't afford 15 minutes a day every day.
Yes. But good question. Yeah. So the second thing that I want to tell you, so this is a little tangent, but I am actually going to have a retreat this coming week. And it's a retreat of the women in medicine that I'm coaching. They've been coaching with me for a while. It's going to be beautiful. So they've done some of this work already. So I'm going to, they don't know this, but this is their first exercise, what I'm going to tell you right now. So it's let go with intention. And actually, let me give you another tangent because I love tangents. As a psychiatrist, I do not like that phrase, let it go, because it's minimizing. And I always say, if there was a switch in our brain that we could turn on and off just to let it go, don't worry about it, right? Like that would be nice. Some people, I guess, have a easier time doing that, but a lot of us who struggle don't. So I don't mean it in a minimizing way. I mean it from, right, like what comes after that awareness. You have the awareness, and the exercise is that we're going to write it all. Right? You have the awareness, you thought about it. Get your pen and give yourself again 5 minutes and just start writing down all those negative things that you say to yourself, all those people you know that you need to get out of your life or at least spend less time. That thing that you've said yes, that you do because it feels good, but they're not paying you and now it's a drain. Write it all down, big and small. And know that no one needs to read this. So no edits, no judgment. Just go ahead and write it. And then so the exercise that I'm going to do with these women in the retreat, they have a workbook. So they're going to very dramatically tear off that page and then we're going to burn it. Or you can break it up, put it in the trash, or you can bury it, whatever you want. Just make it symbolic because that's your anchor. That's how you're going to internalize it in your body. Like I am very intentionally letting these things go. And again, it's not like it's magic, but these are the steps that we can take to help us get the things that we want and move forward. Have you done something like that, Erin?
I have heard about things like that, but I think that we are so used to just piling on. pile
Yeah.
on, piling on, and piling on. And, if it's gradual, sometimes it's not, then we may not notice how buried we are. And so this practice, and I think that we need to practice these things and having some ceremony in our lives, which I think is so
Yes.
missing. And physically, mentally, emotionally letting go of those things. What a beautiful, I can picture it right now, a beautiful way of doing that and letting people experience it. So they're like, oh, I could do this at home. Doesn't cost me anything more than a match and some
Yeah.
paper.
Be careful,
That's
of
beautiful.
course.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. I can't wait to hear all about it.
Yeah. And I love your word. Thanks for bringing it up of ceremony, because
Mhm.
again, that's how we anchor it. And that's how, right? Like if we talk about the different layers of consciousness and the things that we know intellectually, and then how we go a little bit deeper and then we feel them in our bodies and we create different memories, right? So these are all little details that add up to do something different. And
Mhm.
and you might be thinking, oh my goodness, what is that psychiatrist saying? Like, that sounds like a little woo woo. Well, it's okay. It can be,
Mhm.
right? Like, it's why minimize something that can be helpful, right? Because I can
Mhm.
come here and talk all about the brain and medications and all those things. And my mission is for us to find other things, right? All the tools that we can to be better. So don't minimize it just because it's something that you haven't done
Yeah.
before.
Well,
I
but I
had those
think,
thoughts the first time too, and I was like, "What? You want
yeah.
me to do what with that paper?"
But think
And I
about,
still
we
remember.
we learn from our emotions, and I think that especially as physicians, we are so science oriented, and in our heads, we forget to be in our hearts and in our bodies. And that's something that I've learned over the last few years, and definitely working with you, is what people might consider woo woo. Let's can we be more open and saying, I wonder, and get curious. I wonder what I might experience if I give this a try and see, and then you might be surprised. So yeah, getting more in our hearts and in our bodies, I think, is something that especially physicians can use a little bit more of that in our lives. So hopefully we'll be challenging you a little bit more on
Yeah.
that for those of you in the medical field.
Yes, yes, yes. I love that. And I love that word, wonder. I just love, love, love that word. I'm always like, I wonder if, right? It just adds to the curiosity. So let me tell you the third one, right? So you've had the awareness, you've kind of cleaned up the space, and now you have more room to grow, right? Like, this is why we do this, right? So then now think of the space that you have mentally and emotionally, physically, and what do you want to add back in, right? And so, and you can even turn some of those negative thoughts that you were able to identify, turn them around a little bit, right? We cannot go 180 because our brain is not going to believe it. Just turn it around in a way that feels grounding, that feels a little bit more positive, and have the courage and the self-love to prioritize your well-being, right? And that's, we're so much about well-being and all the things there that we're going to keep on talking about. But sometimes we know the tools and we beat ourselves up because we start and then we have obstacles that we can't even identify, and it's because we have not done this work of identifying what's getting in the way. What's the little cleanup that we have to do so that then we can put these other things, right? And then identify your values again. What are your goals? What are those things that you want to do? And right, like, what put it back in, right? So a good journal prompt here, it's just thinking of that, like, what are my values in this time of my life? What are the things that I want to prioritize? Because it's not just the good things. A lot of times when we're right, again, like this group of, like, we're professional, we're successful, but we're struggling. We have a lot of good things that we've done and that we have opportunities to work on, but they sometimes can compete, or right, like, we have to make those decisions, and it's good to pause and ask, what's important for me right now? What are those decisions that I need to make? And now you have the space, right? Like, now you recognize what are some of those mental obstacles that get in the way, and what are those few things that you need to put back in for your own self-care. Because if we're not well, there's just so much that we can do professionally if we're not mentally, emotionally, physically well, right? So that's what we are one of our big missions here for you all.
Yeah. I think that one of the most powerful things I heard you say, like, I always like to have at least one takeaway when I listen to a podcast or when I'm going to a training. And you talked about the power of the pause. How often do we just race into things without pausing? And I use this statement, go slow to go fast. If we can pause and know what direction do we want to go, then we're not dealing with randomness anymore. And so that's really going to stick with me, the power of the pause. So, can I go ahead and kind of summarize what you went through, Joanne? What I heard you say is the three tools that we can take away and start implementing right now. First is that awareness about what's going on and really acknowledging and maybe not denying what's going on if you're struggling or overwhelmed. The next thing is, what can you let go? Or maybe if you think about it as math, what can you subtract from your life?
Yes.
What's not serving you? Because just cramming more in there isn't going to work. And then with that subtraction, now you have some space that now you can decide intentionally what you want to now add into your life so you can have some growth. And with that, I'd
Yes,
love
love
to
it.
hear any last thoughts that you have today, Joanne.
Yes, I always like to say, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's okay to not be okay. I know sometimes we do these exercises and it can remind us of difficult times, difficult thoughts, and that's okay. And again, reframe to something that feels grounding and then it feels good to you. And then also acknowledge that I am making it sound simple, right? And saying these are the 3 steps, but these are not easy exercises. But I still encourage you to go through them, come back to them. And we're actually going to put in the show notes a link that you can get with some of these journal prompts. So it's easier if you want to come back to them because these are very powerful. These are exercises that I do all the time myself and it helps me move forward and it gives me awareness. I'm like, oh yeah, I have to come back to that, right? Without judgment and again, always with love and self-compassion.
Love that. All right. So you've got in the show notes, you'll have a link to get those prompts so you can journal as well as Joanne does. And with that, thank you so much for being here. We're signing off, Dr. Erin and Joanne, and we'll see you next time. Stay tuned.
Don't miss out on more strategies that will elevate you to new heights. Visit successfulbutstruggling.com now, where you'll discover exclusive resources and the opportunity to connect with each of us individually. There you can dive deeper into how you, too, can take your personal and professional game to the next level. And if you're serious about optimizing your results, take 2 quick steps now. Number 1, connect with us on the website. And number 2, tune in to the next episode.